Hello, my friends. Welcome to this workshop by the Existential Academy on befriending your emotions. I will start admitting people when they arrive rather than waiting to have them all in the room. So here we go. Hello,
Hello.
welcome. I decided to admit people as they arrive so that we can have a little chat before the workshop starts. Feel free to open up your camera and your hello. I'm
Hello.
me,
I'm
your
Christian.
Christian.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And we got another guest already arriving.
Hello, Emmy.
Hello, nice to see you.
Emmy,
What's your
you are
name?
the reason. Oh, I need to write. Sorry, I have to write.
Yes, if you could do that,
Yorgos.
that would be
Yes, I will
great.
write. So, how do I do
We got
that?
another 7 minutes before the workshop starts, and people are arriving slowly one by one. So I'm admitting them as we go along. So do open up your cameras if you're arriving, because it's quite a small workshop. There's only 22 of us here, so we can all say hello before we begin. Hi, Katie. Hi, Anastasia. If you could use the
I need
chat.
to listen to me. Is it clear? Is it okay for you?
Yeah, it's very good.
So,
Yes,
morning. I'm very
perfect.
happy
Yes,
to be here.
very good. Hi, Georges. Thanks for putting your name in there. Hi, Katie and Anastasia. Could you write in the chat who you are and where you are from? Because people will be able to respond to that and see that, um, which will be great. So I will do that too. So let me do that now.
Okay, I'm going to try it as well.
Yeah. Can you see my message there?
I can.
Cool. There's Joanne. Hi, Katie. A trainee counselor from Sheffield. Oh, well, that's great. Little girl Daisy. Fantastic. Hello, Daisy. Marvelous. Nice to see you there. It's nice to see somebody in Sheffield. I lived in Sheffield for 22 years. Yeah, well, in Sheffield itself for 2 years and 20 years in the Peak District. So I am in Sussex now. I'm in mid Sussex, not too far from Brighton. Stony Middleton. Oh, yes, I remember it well, near Bakewell. Those were the days. Amazing place. Yes. And Georgios from Greece. And the last 15 years in Austria. Wow, that is quite a span, isn't it? Of different places. And we got some more people coming in. There we go. Ah, I see Dawn is here too. Hello, Dawn. Nice to see you here. I have a feeling, yes, my co-host is here now, so I don't have to worry about admitting people into the group anymore because somebody else will be doing that now. Hi, Helen. Glad to have you there.
Hi, Emmy.
Hi.
So we should have about 27 people joining. So
Oh,
I will,
27. Okay.
yes, I'll keep an eye on the list and
Yes.
admit
Okay.
people as we go
I will
along.
leave that in your capable hands then, Helen.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
Okay, I won't be admitting any more people. You can do it.
Yeah.
But I have asked people, for those who have just arrived, could you put who you are and where you are zooming in from today in the chat room, because that will help us getting a sense of the group and who we are. I don't think we'll do any breakout rooms today because we're a fairly small group, and I hope you will feel able to participate a little bit in the group itself. I will ask you to do some exercises now and then, but you can do that if you have a notepad next to you. You can make some notes. Right. Yes. Hi, Dawn. Nice to have you here. And there's Anastasia from Germany, an existential psychologist and living in Greece now. Here we have these wonderful migrationary movements across Europe. I love to see that sort of thing. So the Greek person lives in Austria and the German person lives in Greece. You've done a sort of an exchange there. It's quite funny, I think. And Alex here from Vaupel Klein, a doctor from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Well, welcome. Leuk om een Nederlander erbij te hebben. And here's Joanne, who is in Ireland studying psychotherapy, a first year student. Well, Joanne, you're very welcome. Lovely to have you here today. And I'd love to hear where you are in
Thank
Ireland.
you. I'm in Tipperary.
Oh, Tipperary. Here was I
Yes.
saying, you're probably in Dublin, but no,
No, no, no. In the
Tipperary.
countryside.
That, can you tell us where that is? Because, not everyone
Yes.
knows that.
Yes. So it would be Dublin would be more the south. Like I'm down I'm down near Cork. So it's down kind
Oh,
of
all the way down,
yeah, to the
yes.
south. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
south coast.
South or yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So it's a nice part of the country.
And yeah, I know it well. I went to Cork University quite a few times to do
Oh
some
wow.
teaching there on their
Yes.
counseling course, but like 20 years ago. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but it's lovely out there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's lovely.
Very, very, very special and green.
Yes, but because we've so much rain,
I
unfortunately.
know. It always shocks me when I come back from the United States and the plane goes over
Yeah,
Ireland. It is truly a green country from the
yeah,
air.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really amazing. Yeah. It says a lot, doesn't it? Right, well, let me move on here. So, Ava in Hungary and recently moved back from Scotland. Amazing. Travelers everywhere. And Emily, yes, MA in Dublin, Ireland, but from Boston. So we do have somebody from Dublin after all. Very interesting. Have I missed out somebody? Oh, yes. Foundations for Life Practitioner, Bonding and Attachment with Under Twos. French and living in Cornwall. Well, gosh, I rest my case. This is fabulous. Welcome, Emmanuel. C'est bien de t'avoir ici aussi. And Vernica, London. Hi, Vernica. Nice to have somebody from London. There don't seem to be many people from London here today at all. So we have an international group of people, which is lovely to see. Paula from Matlock in Derbyshire. Well, that's not so far from Sheffield at all. Very nice to have you from Derbyshire. And then we have Marzana from Warsaw in Poland. Extraordinary. Welcome, Marzana. And Chris, also joining from London. So we do have several people in London. And Vicky, also here from Cork. Do you know each other? Joanne and Vicky, do you know each other?
Yes.
Both you.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think we're doing the same course.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to hear. And there we are. We have Gloria Ruggieri, who I know from way back, way, way back. I dread to think when, Gloria. Do you remember when you worked with me in the past? Can you remind me? Open your microphone, don't hesitate. And Gloria is an Italian living in Oxford. Are you here? And here is Jane Nixon from Kent. That's not
Morning.
so far from where I am. Hello, Jane.
Morning. Hi.
Nice
Morning,
to see you.
everyone.
Oh, I love all the plants around you.
Thank you.
That's very lovely.
Hi, Emmy. It's Gloria speaking to
Gloria,
you.
yes.
I
So
did
when did we
train
last
with
meet?
I trained with you at Regent's College
You did.
long time ago.
That will be over probably 30 years ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
30 years ago. But I
How
remember with
extraordinary.
passion. Thank you.
Extraordinary. Well, lovely to have you back here. We've both changed quite a bit, I'm sure, since that
Yeah,
moment. Much has happened.
yes. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Right. Well, I think we got 24 people. Oh, there you are. Lovely to see you. Yes. So I think we must make a start because there is a lot to say about befriending your emotions, and it is such a very important topic. I am going to lecture about various things, and I will also try to draw you in to ask me questions and to work a little bit on your own material. But if you don't want to be recorded, then you need to keep your cameras off, and I will be asking you to all turn off your audio so that there aren't any echoes as we are speaking. So this will be recorded, and we will do a version of the recording to put online. So bear in mind that you will be visible, and if you don't want that, switch off your cameras and keep them switched off at all times. Right. So here we are. Yeah, okay. I will ignore the people who arrive next. There are 26 of you here now, so we're nearly complete. So let's begin, and I shall start sharing my PowerPoint slides for you about befriending your emotions. I think you're all aware of how emotional people are around the world and how important it is that we take some time to think about these things. And this workshop hopefully will help you in doing that, although 2 hours about this topic is, of course, a very short slot. But it's also good sometimes to go fast on these things and just refresh your mind and then think about it for yourself. So, just a little advertising for the New School of Psychotherapy and Counseling. It's 5 master's programs and it's 2 doctoral programs, but you can look it up for yourself if you're interested, and I shall say no more. This workshop is offered to you by the Existential Academy, which is based in the building in West Hampstead where the New School is also based. And the Existential Academy offers short courses and professional training courses and various other services which are not academically accredited. I work also very much with the existential movement of which I am president, and that is a worldwide organization, and its motto is bringing wisdom to the world. And I would say understanding your emotions and learning to befriend them and see their value is one of the most important ways in which we begin to bring wisdom to the world. Here is just some background about me. So I have written these 20 books to date, or co-authored or co-edited. They have been translated into 24 languages, and my work, including papers and things like that, translated into 32 languages. So it's very exciting to, work worldwide, internationally, and realize this growing appetite for an existential understanding of human existence. So this is the book that will be coming out in March, which I co-authored with my close colleague Claire Arnold Baker, who is now the principal of NSPC, which is about a research method in existential analysis. And this is the one I am currently finishing, which is probably going to be called The Art of Freedom rather than The Art of Existential Freedom. And it will be published with Penguin Books, which will be a book for the wider public rather than an academic book. All my books to date have been academic books, but this one will be for the general public. Now, today I'm speaking to you about befriending your emotions in a very existential way, but I will just say emotions are a topic that are widely researched in psychology, and there are many different theories about human emotions, which I will not be speaking about. There are evolutionary theories, social theories, internal theories, physiological theories, neurological theories, and cognitive theories, and there are many in each of those categories. The human emotions are being researched widely. There is a lot of stuff available on it, but I will not go into any of that because I am taking an existential, phenomenological approach. And what that means is, well, for today, is that we will look at the relevance of us working with our own emotions in a way that allows us to live better lives, and how it feels to have emotions, and how we deal with our emotions, and what the meaning of our emotions is. And why is that so important? Because none of all this research and all this knowledge has actually stopped this increasing, concerning expansion of psychiatric and psychological and emotional problems around the world. So earlier this year, in the Psychiatric Times, the front page was a year of record high suicide rates. This is in America. And it is true that this is the first year that suicide rates in the USA have hit the highest record before that, which was in 1941. 1941 was the year the United States joined the Second World War, and it led to a spate of suicides in the USA. We know that anxiety is at a high across the world as well. At least 40 million Americans are affected by anxiety each year, Well, of course, all of us experience anxiety every day, but at least 40 million Americans go to consult a physician usually to have help with their anxiety because they feel they cannot cope. The same is true for over 8 million people a year in the UK and 12% of the European population at any one time. This is an extraordinary, mounting level of anxiety. And there are many forms of that anxiety, as we know, generalized anxiety disorder, but also phobias, panic disorder, OCD, PTSD, SAD, social anxiety. All of those things are really about people not feeling they can manage the level of their anxiety. And there is a lot of evidence that the medication doesn't necessarily help. This is also a great concern. So many more people are also depressed than ever before. And the use of antidepressants is almost of a viral nature. So it goes up and has every year and has tripled over the past 2 decades from 18.4 million in 98 to 70.9 million in 2018 in the UK alone. It defies the imagination when you begin to think about the amount of anxiety and depression that is going around the world the whole time. The nice figures are that the cost of anxiety in the EU was 41 billion euros in 2004 prices. It's a great deal more now. There are 60,000 deaths by suicide in the EU alone. So these are all emotional problems. These are all situations where people feel they're out of control. Their emotions have taken them over. They cannot cope. And the medical view about these things is to look at the chemistry of it, or the hormonal theories behind it, or these various other theories that you see there. And there are many of these. And all of that research is invaluable because it is good to find out how these things affect the body. The trouble is, though, that people act as if it is the body that makes this happen, so that then the person feels this, and that therefore we then have to adjust the body, assuming that will sort the problem, when clearly it is an existential problem, which then affects the body. So we got this topsy-turvy, and as long as we keep this topsy-turvy, we are not going to address the problem. So Joanna Moncrief and her colleagues have done more than most in debunking the idea that depression is about a chemical imbalance or it is about the serotonin uptake. Their research is above and beyond reproach. It's very thorough. If you're interested, take a photo, look it up. It is not like that. Depression and anxiety are emotional states, and we need to understand why so many people feel despondent or incapable of coping with the stresses of their lives. Let me throw another part into the equation. The UN Environment Programme has warned that the planet is declining, not just in terms of an impending climate crisis, which actually we now know is already on the way, but also in many other ways. So, for instance, we are currently using the equivalent of 1.6 Earth to maintain our current way of life, and the ecosystems cannot keep up with us. So 1 million of the world's estimated 8 million species of plants and animals are threatened with extinction. That's scary. That's a lot. 75% of the Earth's land surface has been so altered by what humans have done to it that they are no longer in operational state. 66% of the ocean area is impacted by human activities. 66%. Close to 90% of the world's marine fish stocks are overexploited or depleted. So the global food system is driving this biodiversity loss. And these are huge, huge problems. Between these things that are accumulating and the climate problems, we are going in the wrong direction. At the same time, we see this increase around the world of man-made wars, totally man-made wars, political upheavals, power struggles, territorial struggles, but also natural disasters like we saw in Spain last week, which frighten each and every one of us. It is no longer the case that we can just pretend it isn't happening because it's over there. We are now bound together by the internet and by the news that comes from around the world, and we feel increasingly insecure and uncertain about the future. The suffering we see on our television screens of people in Ukraine or the Middle East remind us of our own fragility, not just of the earth. We identify, we make it our own. So what do we do about all that? If all these things are so troubling and we feel implicated, how can we address what is happening and learn to understand how we have failed to listen to our emotions, to know what is of value in the world? So how do we recreate connectivity between us and between ourselves and the planet? And how do we collaborate instead of being in this death knell of competition and therefore constantly feeling threatened or deficient or failing, which is what happens to a lot of people? We need to learn to listen more to our feelings. It's not about cognitive understanding of our feelings. It is about actually befriending our feelings and listening to them and trusting them, and to have greater clarity about the values that those feelings point us towards. It is also about establishing better communication with each other about what we feel. So how can existential ideas create a bridge to do these things? Well, it can do that because an existential approach is a philosophical view of human troubles and human conflicts, which takes a very broad, universal outlook and which helps us to renew our thinking and therefore our understanding about what human existence is actually for and what it is about. So that allows us to approach these things in a creative and a reflective and a dynamic way, to make it our own, to be part of it, to interact with it, to make it relevant rather than abstract. We can engage with it, we can rediscover meaning and purpose in our lives. This is about a search for what is actually true, rather than being trapped in the idea that truth is always relative and subjective. It is also about having a kind of new moral courage to affirm the values that can make the world a better place, and to affirm those in the widest possible way in the global world. Why does this matter? Well, let's go to a scientific study here. Robert Waldinger is now the head of a Harvard study on adult development, which has been going on for 80 years. This has brought us an amazing array of information about what actually works in a person's life and what doesn't work in a person's life. So he took two groups. Well, the Harvard study took two groups in 1938. Think of it, that's a long time ago. One group was sophomores at Harvard, so they were highly privileged group of young boys. And then to match that, a similar group from Boston's poorest neighborhoods. And then gradually they started to include wives and children, and now they're into the second and third generations of this. These people have had their health and mental health scrutinized year on year. And what this has shown is that it really doesn't matter how much people earn or what level they reach in society. What matters is that they create networks of meaning in their lives. And networks of meaning are generated mainly from the networks of relationships that they create or they are part of. So that includes family, friends, and community connections, and also professional connections. So what Waldinger says in his TED Talk, which I strongly recommend to you, and again, if you're interested, take a picture and you can find it. So he likes to say, what we found is as simple as this: loneliness kills. People who are isolated, and you may be isolated even when you're surrounded by lots of people, don't get me wrong, to create a meaningful network is to actually be at ease with the people you're connected up with, not just to be with lots of people. If you don't have that, your chances of longevity go way, way down. Your chances of not having a mental illness go way, way up. So loneliness is bad for you, yet 1 in 5 Americans is lonely. Conflict is extremely bad for your health. If you live in ongoing conflict, the first thing you need to do is resolve the conflict in your life. And all of these things are emotional things. And all of these things can only be addressed if people learn to listen to themselves and they learn to befriend their emotions rather than being afraid of them or try to suppress them. So there's a lot we know, but how do we make these changes? It's never easy for a person to come to be in the world in a comfortable way. Number one, you have to learn to survive. You have to learn lots of skills. You have to have lots of know-how to find your way. You also have to find a way to let yourself be welcomed by the people around you, and indeed to welcome yourself into the world and to know what it is you can offer to the people around you. This capacity of contributing something to the world is absolutely essential. And I think this is key because lots of people who come for psychotherapy feel disenfranchised. They feel they're in hiding. They feel they cannot contribute anything to the world, that people will ridicule them or try to get rid of them or, are not interested in what they have to say, that they're not important. That is the killer. Right. So it is about learning to respect and love yourself and learning to respect and love other people. Those are very important basic things. We don't really teach kids these things at all. This also requires you to find space and time to reflect and to learn to listen to how you are responding to what is happening in your life, to learn to read your emotions and to translate them into thoughts, to articulate to yourself what they are about, and therefore to learn integrity. And this is how you will also learn resilience and thriving despite of misery and adversity, which are unfortunately part and parcel of life. Now, when I say that I give you an existential phenomenological approach, I take that to include any philosophical theories that have purported to what makes a person live better in the world. So any philosophy that has thought and written about how to live a better life is part of my interest in what we can learn, what wisdom we can gather to live better lives, and especially how to live better with our emotions. So the classic solutions, of course, are Platonism, based in Socrates' dialogues, who said that the unreflected life is not worth living. This is as true today as it ever was. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most well-known Stoicists, said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." And those are two very fundamental ideas, that to teach yourself how to be alive to your emotions allows you to start engaging with life in a much more active way and to actually begin to live. And that when you do so, you stop being afraid of so many things and you start building your courage. Here are some of the early existential therapists that I would recognize as having made important contributions. Gilgamesh, which is basically Noah in the Bible, as far back as 2750 BC. Dvaipayana, Krishna, 1500 BC. Moses, 1400 to 1280 BC. Zoroaster, 630 to 553 BC. Lao Tse in China, 604 to 531. Gautama Buddha, 563 to 510. Confucius, 557 to 479. All of these are early pre-Socratic philosophers who tried to teach people how to live better with their emotions. Unfortunately, what they all have in common, all of them, and many of the Athenian philosophers have in common with them too, is that they all thought emotions bad, let's get rid of them. How to suppress them, how to calm them. Right. Socrates thought about it slightly differently. He taught people to examine life in a calm way in order to cultivate the love of wisdom. And he was quite calm about that, though. But he did examine emotions very carefully in his dialogues. So for him, it was all about rediscovering the light of truth about living. And he said, philosophy begins in wonder. And that is a very important attitude to cultivate. To ask yourself again, what is it that I'm doing living this life? And what is it I'm feeling about this? And what does that mean? It is this attitude of inquiry and wondering that will stop you flying into anxiety and depression and begin to engage with your capacity for emotionality and your capacity for living. So he said that he knew nothing, but other people thought he was the wisest man that had ever lived. He said, to find yourself, you need to learn to think for yourself. It is a process that happens inside of you. And the Oracle of Delft, which said, know yourself, was basically his motto. Start by knowing yourself. Start by knowing your emotions and your thoughts. Familiarize yourself with those and come to create an inner world where all of that is alive, bright, and welcome. Because once you know what is right, you will do what is right. Socrates claimed that nobody wants to be evil, that all evil in the world comes from people who are ignorant. And I tend to believe he is right. They're either ignorant or they wrongly believe that they think they know things when actually they don't know them. So for Plato, it was all about getting people to get out of the chains they are locked in this cave. You see them sitting behind that wall. This is Plato's cave. He thought human beings spend most of their lifetime sitting behind this wall, looking at images on a wall, which are just projected things of, these things that people are carrying around and that fire that throws a light on it. We don't need this. All we need to think about how most people spend their lives now interpreting images on screens and believing that what they see on the screens should determine their emotions and, basically is what their life amounts to. Plato reminded us that it's possible to release ourselves from those chains and get out of the cave. He also said that the philosopher who's gotten out of the cave then has a duty to go back into the cave to release the other prisoners from the cave. And I think that is also a very important understanding. So I won't tell you too much about Plato, but his search for truth, really following the dialectic movement of dialoguing about things that Socrates had demonstrated in action, was a very important search for truth. Plato was the teacher to Aristoteles, and he came up with a theory of ethics that was based in virtue. So to live a good life, Aristoteles said, you have to live lining up with your demon, with your inner, powers, which is your emotional understanding of what is going on. So there is still a lot of relevance in Aristotle's ideas as well. Aristotle also taught that the philosophy teacher's discourse with the pupil should be cooperative, critical, and insisting on virtues like orderliness, deliberateness, and clarity. These are all ways in which we need to proceed when we approach our emotions. So people are taught to separate true beliefs from false beliefs and to modify and transform their passions accordingly. Because when you start to know what are the worthwhile objectives and values, you will be winnowing and sifting your opinions, and you'll start to have different kinds of reactions and responses. Epicurus is an interesting case because he thought that in order to treat human suffering and, too many emotions, what you needed to do was to remove any corrupting desires. It was really an application of Aristotelian understanding. So by eliminating things that give you painful emotions, you eliminate emotional disturbance. So it was about adjusting your values and retaining those that would bring you good feelings and pleasure. Now, let's go to the skeptics. The skeptics went one step further, while the Epicureans just say you need to get rid of false beliefs, which is, by the way, pretty much what we now find in cognitive behavioral therapy. So Epicureans try to get rid of false beliefs, but skeptics want to get rid of all beliefs. So skeptics say, well, if you just stop wanting stuff or believing in anything, challenging everything, questioning everything, then you will have no emotions to react to things, because our emotions are always a reaction to the things that matter to us. There you are. That is the beginning of insight. Many young people go through a skeptical phase where they learn to do this for themselves. They don't want to get drawn in to the emotionality in their families, and they start going, oh yeah, don't care. Oh no, that doesn't mean anything to me. Oh, rubbish. That kind of attitude is actually quite widespread in society at large. Stoical philosophy added something else to how we deal with our emotions. So Stoicism is a very interesting trend in philosophy, and it goes right across from Greece to Rome, and it starts with Zeno in 300 BC, and it's still going strong in 180 AD with Marcus Aurelius. So that's a very long-lived form of philosophy. Why is it so powerful? Well, I think it is because it got a lot of things right. And I think a lot of what is done in coaching today is based on basic Stoical ideas. So, in order to improve a person's life, according to Stoics, the soul must be exercised every day. It is the equivalent of training your body. So in the same way in which you should go, said the Greeks and the Romans, in which you should go to the gymnasium every day to build your muscles and your strength and keep your health, as well as eating decent food, you also need to train your soul, by which they mean the same thing, the psyche, as we would today maybe call the self. And we do this in Stoicism by the use of logic, understanding how to think better, but also the use of poetry, which is about expressing the feelings that you otherwise might not be able to express. And that brings music to the fore as well. As psychotherapists know, clients often get a great deal better at expressing their emotions when they are allowed to get to listen to the music that really moves them, or they talk about movies that really move them, or art that moves them, or when they indeed bring poems that touch something in them. So these are all ways, the arts are all ways in which we can get a person more in touch with their inner world and begin to be aware of what is alive in them and express it and make sense of it. The objective for the Stoics is always wisdom, whereas unfortunately in coaching it is often not wisdom, but success and power and doing well at the competitive game of society. So there is something that has gone skewed, I think, in our culture, which may indicate why our civilizations are in so much trouble. So the objective should actually be wisdom, to just understand how it works, to understand this life that has been given to you. And what about detachment and self-control, though? They called it apathy, and that was a positive concept. So for Stoics, it was about overcoming weakness by ordering the self and the soul, creating moral fiber and really toughening the person up. And it is not by chance that many of the Roman generals were well-known Stoics, like Cicero, for instance, and indeed Marcus Aurelius. But here is Epictetus, a Stoic slave, a slave between 80 and 135 AD. And his idea is very interesting. He said that a man cannot consider himself free unless he is the master of his own actions by possessing self-control. So self-possession may be a very good first step towards this objective of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, and you should all read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, which has just been republished in a very accessible publication, easy to find. He's easy to read, he's engaging, totally relevant to every single person today. Said it's not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. And the paradox is that death, troubles, labor and failure, pain and sorrow are unavoidable and necessary. Now, that's a hard message, but that's totally aligned with the existential message, which is the objective of therapy is never to pretend that you can remove these difficulties from a person's life, but rather that by understanding how that paradox of life works, the emotionality in a person's life will become very different. When you start realizing that these difficulties in your life are things that wake you up to awareness, you stop being so afraid. So this kind of fear about the emotions that has always existed became greater after the end of Stoicism. Because basically what happened at the end of that is that we entered into the 2 millennia of Christianity taking over the Western world. And during that time, a lot of philosophy was Christian-based. And that was based on the idea that emotions were caused by the 7 deadly sins. And this is a painting by one of my favorite medieval painters, Hieronymus Bosch, who explain to you how wrath, envy, greed, gluttony, sloth, lust, and pride lead a person to suffer in life, but also, the Christian message would lead you after death to judgment, where you would basically miss out on heaven and find yourself in hell. It took a long time till about 1650 or so for the first message to change back to an existential message rather than a Christian message, with Baruch Spinoza, when he wrote his book called The Ethics, like Aristotle's book, where he came to formulate us dealing with our emotions as being related to us understanding how the universe works. And this was no longer a Christian or any other sort of form of religion's universe. It was a universe that was pantheistic. So he said, everything in the universe is one. It's all linked together. And if we are aligned with how that is linked together, we will understand what things are necessary. And when we understand what is necessary, we also understand what is possible. And when we can make the distinctions between what is necessary and what is possible or impossible, our emotions calm down enormously. So he basically said, and there he is, our Baruch Spinoza, he concluded that life should be considered in Latin sub specie aeternitatis, which means it needs to be seen from the perspective of eternity. Now, this is a really interesting turnaround. It's almost like a Copernican revolution, because he said, instead of starting to deal with your emotions from the perspective of your own suffering, if you look at them as a logical response to what is the case in the world, you will find peace. So he spoke about this universe that was governed by necessary laws which no human can change. And if we respect and understand those, will allow us freedom. Of course, all these religious searches look for those same things, but they link them with the idea of a God. These are the laws that God has given, whereas Spinoza was the first one who started saying this is actually something that is of the order of the universe. And since we are a part of the universe, that power and those laws are an integral part of each and every one of us. And therefore, each and every one of us has the capacity to understand our emotions, make sense of them, and live in a better way. The next one you need to know about is Søren Kierkegaard. So Søren Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher, early 19th century, really wrote about his own emotions in a very clear and very self-observant, incisive way. And he was particularly good at explaining what anxiety was. He called it the dizziness of freedom. And he said, whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate. It's such a powerful statement. Anxiety and living well with your anxiety is the crux of life. So he talked about life being a constant breathing, a constant inhaling and exhaling, a constant synthesis of possibility and necessity, exactly like Spinoza. So to live and to live well is to be in balance between your anxiety, which is your inhaling, and your exhaling, which is your sadness, your letting go, your losses, and your despair. You inhale, you aspire to things, you exhale, you despair of things. You inhale, you aspire, you exhale, you let go. Both of those things are an essential part of human existence. These are not emotions to fear, but emotions to work with. Now, remember what I started with? This scourge of anxiety and depression in the world, which we're medicating people for so much. These are the basic emotions of human existence. The inspiration, anxiety, oh my God. The expiration, oh no. Both those things are needed. Comes on the scene our Martin Heidegger, the sort of most famous existential philosopher. There he is, who spoke a lot about how human beings are in time and how they are thrown into a world and care about the world. But this is the bit you need to know for today. He said there are basically three ways in which we are in existence. We are in Befindlichkeit, which literally from the German translated is the way I find myself, which is our state of mind, our disposition, the way in which we are situated towards the world in the situation we find ourselves in. So don't translate Befindlichkeit just with emotionality. It's often translated as affectivity. It is how we are affected by the world. But it is key. For Heidegger, this is basically how we start out, as a resonance with how we are in the world, an affectivity, a state of mind, a mood. Then in a secondary way, we are capable of understanding what those emotions mean. We can translate them. We can articulate them. We can have thoughts about them. So by feeling into the world, we learn to also speak about the world. And that brings us to the third one, which is discourse, which is where we can talk about things to find meaning in things. So our attunement to the world, our Stimmung, is always fundamental to what is going on in our lives. Most people are afraid of feeling into our moods, our feelings, our understanding. We suppress it as much as we can, and we don't articulate it because we're ashamed of it, or we think other people don't want to hear about it. So we don't even articulate it to ourselves either, because really it is only when we have learned to articulate something to another that we develop the capacity to articulate things in ourselves and create that internal world that becomes our capacity for understanding and integrity. So he spoke a lot about anxiety and the importance of how it makes us feel insecure and uncanny, but how important it is to feel that, because he believed that fundamentally human beings are insecure and uncanny because they are, I haven't written it down there, they are unheimlich, they are not at home, they are homeless. Human beings have to create a lot of stuff to make it possible to survive. And so that feeling of insecurity is a huge driver. It makes us anxious because anxiety is the energy we need to do the work we need to do in order to secure ourselves in the world, in order to work. That is how that works. Ah, there we are. So Unheimlichkeit is being uneasy, not feeling at home. That is the feeling of anxiety that lifts your energy and that feels so uncomfortable. You want to hide away. You don't want that feeling of insecurity and anxiety, but you need it. You need to feel anxious because you need to go out of your comfort in order to do what is needed to improve things in your life. You cannot just sit in comfort. Otherwise, you become dependent on the world of other people, and that is a very uncomfortable position to end up with. So, learn to listen to your emotions. That was very much Heidegger's message, although he never said it like that. He did say emotions are our very orientation in the world, and they are like the weather. There are never no emotions. There are always emotions in your heart. But you learn to ignore them, or you learn to pretend they are not there, or you learn to suppress them, or deny them. Emotions are the setting of our mind, our being, in relation to what is going on. They are privileged information about how we are resonating with what we perceive as happening to us in that world. Why do we fear them? They are a fantastic part of our existence, exactly as important as our senses. You know how absolutely important your senses are. Everything that comes to you comes through your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your nose, and your fingertips or your skin. Your senses bring the informations that your motor system then responds to and takes action in the world. You can't live without them. You can't live without pain, because pain tells you something is dangerous. And you know, if it's hot, you might burn yourself, so you remove your hand from it. Pain is essential. The sensory input is essential. The emotional input is essential, but we suppress it. We try to live without it. This is the problem in our world. We see emotions as a sickness, when emotions are one of our greatest resources that we need to learn to tune into. Heidegger said, anxiety is great because it individualizes. It brings Dasein, your being, you as a human being, back from falling away from yourself and in with other people. And it makes clear to you that you can choose to be either authentic, which is to be tuned in and tuned into yourself and be alive, or inauthentic, which is to just do as you're told and go along with the flow. Your choice is, am I going to use all these abilities that I have, but that I'm blind to and that I'm suppressing? Am I going to use them, or am I going to be in denial the rest of my life? If you become resolute, it is you becoming loyal to your own existence, which is to open up to all these possibilities in yourself. Now, Heidegger said you can only do that by becoming aware of death, of the end of your existence, of your mortality. Enough about Heidegger. Sartre took it a little bit further and changed it a little bit, but it's basically the same idea, which is that human existence is always a desire for something, and it is always a lack of something, because that's how we are. It's the same as the homelessness idea. We are an empty vessel that needs to be filled all the time, not just with food, but with contact, with new insight, with ideas. In order to stay alive, we have to keep learning. We have to keep feeling. We have to keep creating things out of nothing. We are always surpassing something in ourselves. And we do this in an embodied way and in an emotional way. And emotions, Sartre said, are a way of us to do magic to transform the world. And if we tune into our emotions, we can become reflective about how we are in that world. If we tune out of our emotions, we become non-reflective about it. So let's take all this on board and see how new possibilities emerge once you accept that things are in flow, that they are dynamic, and that human beings have these capacities that we are not using, and that such concepts as yourself or your couple or your society are not actually things. They are merely a matrix for values to manifest, and they unfold slowly, and we can change them. Not only can we change them, but we affect them every day of our lives, and we can learn to be much more engaged with all of that, so that we begin to evolve as human beings, to find greater freedom, much more meaning as the pieces of the puzzle come together and new things emerge in our lives. Now, instead of being afraid of our anger, for instance, we recognize that anger is an experience, it is a feeling, it is an attunement to the world. It means something. And what it means always is that a value that we have has been threatened. And so it serves a good purpose to ask yourself, what is that value? And how exactly do I think it is being threatened? So we go from the feeling to the understanding and the contemplation of our situation. And we take into account the facts. What are my limitations? What are my possibilities? What is my capacity? And we see how we can transform the situation by shifting it to a different level, always and always aiming to problem solve and learn, acting instead of reacting. The reason people are afraid of their emotions is that they only experience their emotions in a reactive way, and therefore think, I need to stop them because reaction is bad. Well, they're sort of right about that. If you become very reactive or impulsive, you get out of control. But you can do a lot better than that. You can actually learn to work with your emotions and do the work of actively putting the pieces of the puzzle together as you go about in your everyday life. And that feels good, because now you feel you are an evolving, learning human being. Each day you feel a little bit more at ease with yourself, with your life, and with your understanding of the total picture. Connectivity is the key to emotional well-being. The Harvard study was right, but I think they are missing out how that happens. So they think it's all about your social networks. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. But yes, connectivity is the key. And we know it is. And, all religions are about connectivity, about bringing people together and bringing ideas together to make sense of a world. Unfortunately, religious views get very stolid and very frozen and stop being dynamic and stop being evolutionary. So in your day-to-day life, you know the feeling of how you need to be in control of your connectivity and how good it feels when you are and how bad it feels when you're not. We now know that this is how the brain works too. The brain is all about connectivity. All your 85 billion neurons and your 84 billion other cells in your brain always are making new connections, always rewiring, also losing connections, but also actually making new neurons, we now know. So by doing this emotional learning and learning to be more adaptable and flexible, our neuroplasticity and our dynamic evolution actually happens in our own brains and minds, but also between human beings as we begin to see that this is a possibility of life. So it's very important to wake up your brain. I recommend Lisa Miller's book about this. She did a lot of research in neuroscience about how highly spiritual brains are healthier and more robust, whereas depressed brains are weak and withered. These are facts. She also spoke about awe and transcendence and synchronicity that start happening more and more as people's brains become more activated and more awakened. She found that awakened brains are 35 to 75% less likely to be depressed. But it doesn't mean they have fewer emotions. It doesn't mean that they don't experience sadness. They just don't attribute to themselves, now I need to stay in this low place and I am a depressed person. They work with the sad emotion. They work through their loss. They come back up on the other side. 40 to 80% of people that have this awakened brain are less likely to become substance dependent. We know this stuff. And yet, we're not applying it to our societies. We know so much about the brain now, and yet there are so many people who have very simplistic views about the simple ways in which you can intervene in the brain. The other counterpart to awakening your brain is to allow yourself proper sleep. So it's about the inhaling and exhaling. You need to be wide awake and engaged when you are awake, and you need to really let go into deep sleep when you sleep. We need, again, this book I recommend by Matthew Walker, you need 8 hours of sleep to get enough of that deep sleep, to get enough REM sleep, your dreaming sleep, which is the sleep we now know, which repairs your body and your brain, but also which processes and creates new connections in your brain. During your sleep, your REM sleep, you empty your short-term memory of the day into long-term memory. If you deprive yourself of sleep or you have poor sleep, you are not doing that process. When new learning happens, you are rewiring the brain. As you rewire the brain, everything works better. You're basically updating the self that you are and recreating yourself day by day, according to how engaged you are, how you allow yourself to feel into the world, and how able you are to make sense of it and then put it into your long-term memory. Think of yourself as a network of connections. It's like, the billions of stars in the sky you have in your brain. Your neurons are like a sky at night, but we can see how they're all connected up together. When the links are broken, you feel lost, confused, disenfranchised. Your reactive response will be to fight or flee. You need to find ways to keep your inner balance so that you can sort yourself out at all those 4 basic layers of existence. The physical, looking after your safety, your sleep, your food, your comfort, your survival, your healing, your repair, and your recovery. Your social world, building strong relationships, understand your emotions, building belonging, caring, sharing, and support systems. Psychologically, learning clear thinking, making sense, understanding, creating new perspectives, taking charge, taking responsibility, building your character, yourself. Spiritually, review your values all the time, learn new stuff about how it works, create a new vision for yourself and therefore a new sense of purpose to engage with, a sense of transcendence as well, of dialectical process, of meaning. These are all the ways in which you will build a stronger way of being in your world. You will connect up to the cosmos, to nature, to culture and society, to your family and peers, to yourself as a person as you present yourself in the world, and to yourself as you relate inside of yourself to yourself. And then to that inner spark inside of you, some people call the soul, some people call the spirit. And then right at the core of that space of nothingness that is always there and can be very frightening, but is actually the way in which we make sense of things. So we attune to that world by our desire for the things we value and the things we love and the things we fear of losing, and by dealing with the loss of those things. I created this emotional compass decades ago. There are now many, many versions of it, but nobody has quite understood properly how many aspects of learning are in that, because it is based on the color spectrum. This is not a random arrangement of colors. It is actually how the spectrum of light is arranged in the universe. We'll come back to it. Why does this matter? Well, I believe that our cells are like an eye. The eye is like an eye. We refract the light and the life that comes to us, that we meet in our daily existence. And ourself is like a lens or a prism, like below in that picture. So what happens with a lens or a prism is that it receives light and it can either reflect it, send it back, or absorb it, hold on to it. It can ward it off completely by putting some kind of filter over it, or it can allow it to pass on through the lens. Now, I think this is the essential bit. So this is what our emotions are. They are the light passing through us. And what we have done for millennia is to say, we need to ward that off. Too much. We can't deal with it. Dangerous. No. We need to learn to see how to pass it on. We can learn to magnify our emotions, illuminate our emotions, and refract the different facets of what we feel. It's never simple, it's always complex. So we can learn to understand, reflect, and befriend our emotions. Remember Heidegger's Befindlichkeit. Our attunement can become more clear, more clean, more open. We can change the tone in a room once we can read the emotion in the room. We can change the affectivity in ourselves as we process why we feel the way we are resonating with what is happening in the world. We always have to accept that emotionality is, like Taoism understood so well, always about light and dark. It can never just be about light, it's always about shadows too, because that's how life works. It's not all about prose. You can't live a life that is just about happiness. It's also about lots of negatives like angst and inferiority and social anxiety and physical weakness. And it's only if we can make the positives and the negatives work together that we stand a chance of working with the paradoxical nature of existence, which is reflected in our emotions and the way they work. It is a dynamic system, and you have to tune into that system and understand how it works for it to work in a way that serves you. So life is about highs and lows, big and small, far and near, good and bad. Yeah, there's always both. You can't have one without the other. You can't have a low without a high. You can't have a high without a low. They define each other. There is a dialectical tension between them. That is why it's a paradox. The paradox is that the better you understand about the difference between high and low, the more space you have to move in. The same is true about a battery. You have to have a positive charge and a negative charge. And the bigger you make that difference between those two charges, the more power there will be in the battery. And it's like that in a thunderstorm. The more energy is built up on the land on a hot day, the more positive ions you have there, the more positive the ions are at the top of the clouds at the same time, and the negative charge at the bottom of the cloud. So there will be a discharge and there will be a thunderstorm. And exactly the same happens in your emotions. If you build up a positive charge, you will be building up towards a potential explosive thing unless you find ways of discharging things. So working with things dialectically is to accept these necessary tensions. They're not scary. They are polarities, and we try to separate them all the time, but they're actually only in opposition in order to make energy happens. Human evolution is only possible because there is this dialectical movement, as Hegel pointed out, in history there is a thesis about something, then there will be an opposing thesis called an antithesis, and then history finds a way to synthesize both those ideas and transform them into a transcendent, synthetic view of the world. So you bring your past and your present together and create your future out of it. If you are dynamically aware, that will become more and more obvious to you, and you will do that more and more actively. There is Hegel, who told us about this thing, but of course that was taken from the idea of Plato's dialectical way of proceeding towards wisdom in a dialogue, where you have opposing ideas coming to a synthesis and going beyond that towards a greater and greater understanding of things. So it's like that in life. I'm not going to go over that. That'll take us too much time. In life, it is really about finding purpose and meaning in what we are doing. And so many people are out of touch with that because we have learned to not let the light in. So we don't have these discussions with ourselves or with each other about how to make things more meaningful or what they do mean and how we can deal with ups and downs, shadows and lights. A very basic outline of how life works is that at the physical level, we are caught between our desire to be fully alive and our fear of death. But our value could be something like being as vital as possible, and that's only possible if we accept our mortality. At the social level, we want love and be loved all the time, but we fear hate and we have to deal with disagreements and, people not liking us. And a value is something about reciprocity, where we learn to work with each other and we learn to listen to each other's perspective. So we are together and we recognize love and hate can coexist. So it's not about going for what we desire, but by going for what is of most value, and that always brings the tensions together. Inside of yourself, you would like to have a really strong identity and you fear the freedom of being nothing, of having nothing defining you. But the value could be something like integrity, where you learn to make sense of sometimes I'm like this, sometimes I'm like that. I have some choices. How am I going to shape my character and my future self? So it's all about dynamic progression. At the spiritual level, we'd love a good and peaceful world, and we fear an evil and warring world. But the value might be something more like transparency to what it is that makes something feel good and what it is that makes something evil, and to work towards truth and understanding. So our values, when they are understood through our emotions, become much more flexible and dynamic because they take the emotional compass into account. So let me run you through how that works. Do you remember Kierkegaard's inspiration and expiration? So the inhale is your anxiety, the growing tension of wanting something and fearing you can't pull it off. And the exhaling is the letting go. It's the depression, the decompression of the tension towards its release. So anxiety towards tension, depression towards release. You can see how both of these have a role to play in your everyday life. You need anxiety, which can also be experienced as excitement, and you need depression, which can also be experienced as release. So you know life is going to be always about ups and downs because that's the cyclical nature of everything in life. So going up on this circle towards the top of this circle, which is where your value is, where the tension is also, feels like pressure and hard work and goes with anxiety. Going down is the release, but also feels like loss. Hold those things in mind. So when you're at the top there of the circle, you got a hold of something that is of value to you. But when you're losing it, you go down towards a sense of valuelessness or meaninglessness. The aspiration towards it gives you anxiety. The going down, the loss of it, gives you desperation or despair. Here it is in a way that you can make sense of. When you're at the top, you're holding on to the value, say your relationship, and you're on a high. When you go down a bit from there to the 1 o'clock sort of situation, you become a bit arrogant about it. You're holding on rather tightly. Go down a little bit more, with the threat being even greater, and it is jealousy, where you feel very protective of your value and alert to the threat. A little bit further down, the threat is now so great you become explosively angry because you want to fight for your value and get it back. But that can tip over straight away into despair or sadness, which is why people so often observe that below anger there is sadness waiting to happen. Not for all people, because some people have learned to get so angry so quickly that they have become fighters who always try to get back to what they feel they are entitled to. Some people will fold straight away, and if they can't stop the threat with jealousy and being guarded, they will give up and let go and let themselves decompress into despair, fear, which is the running away from the situation altogether, then further down into the sorrow. I've lost my value. I'm disappointed. I am now disengaged, and I go all the way down where I'm deprived of that value altogether. That's my low, where I am sad. And I can linger there forever because I am now at rock bottom. And I will not make the effort of trying to go up again. I don't want to feel anxious again and then lose something again. This is how people end up at that bottom part of their emotions. And all they want to do is suppress those emotions. They don't want to know about it anymore. Can you blame them? No. But we can teach them. So when you go up from that low position, you feel a sense of shame. It's like, I'm deficient, I'm defective, I'm not going to be able to get up on this difficult hill towards my value. And I feel too anxious. I don't like this. I go back again. I avoid it. I don't feel the excitement yet. I don't want to engage. But then I look at others and I feel envy for what they've got. And I realize eventually that envy alone is not going to do the trick. I have to be willing to actually work towards the thing others have, and that's hard work. And that means I have to tolerate anxiety and difficulties and hard work. And when I do that, then I'm halfway up. I am now in touch with what I desire, and I have hope again. Hope, I always say, is a commitment to the future. It is an active thing you have to do, which is to say, this is what I want. This is how I'm going to work towards it. This is the discomfort I'm going to tolerate in order to get there. The work of love is to actually do that work and to nurture what it is you think is worth fighting for or working towards. And joy is that moment when you see it coming to fruition, which then brings you to your high, where you feel in possession of something that is of value. You know how the story goes, don't you? You can never hold on to that happiness, never. There is always something in your life that will go down and that will be a loss. Every day of your life, there are things you need to work towards. Every day of your life, there are disappointments and losses. This is how life works. As long as you deny that, you're going to fear your emotions. When you accept that, you will start valuing your emotions because they are wondrous, accurate ways of telling you exactly where you are. So let me take you through it one more time. There are basically 4 quarters to this emotionality. You can go into emotions that are basically about fighting a war, which are when you feel your value is threatened. Emotions where you're fleeing in fear and you feel woe, when your value is lost. Then there are emotions of freezing, which are wishful thinking emotions, where there is a promise of value, but you're not sure whether you can pull it off. And then there are emotions of finding your value, which are basically about hard work, and they are about gaining a value. This is a very simple way to get your head around the complexity of your emotions. Broken down, you can look at it a different way as well, which is that the warring mode is often about negation of opposition. The weeping mode is about desperation and letting go. The wishing mode is about aspiration and wanting stuff, but not doing it yet. And the working mode is about consistent affirmation and engagement. And make no mistake, we all do all of those things in many different ways at many different levels every day of our life. So I've taken you through the pride and the jealousy and the anger of that state of war when we are in fighting against a threat. I told you about the despair we feel, the fear we feel, and the sorrow that leads us down towards when we have to let go of a value and feel the loss sharply. The shame and the envy, and then the desire of a new value as we do this very hard work of feeling our aspirations again, but not being quite sure whether we can tolerate the anxiety. And then the sense of gaining our values, finding that hope, loving, learning to love as working, and joy, which is a state of working mode. And here we are back to that whole emotional compass. Now, I would invite you to give yourself a couple of minutes to just look at all of that and see whether that makes sense to you. You can ask me questions about it. But also, I would like you to really ask yourself, how do you experience each of those? And when do you experience each of those? And how do you deal with each of those? And it's really about oiling the machine. allowing yourself to feel these things instead of judging yourself for feeling those things, because they're necessary. All of them are necessary places in your emotional life. Each of them can be a positive experience as well as a negative experience. And there are many ways in which we can look at that. So, for instance, pride can be very negative and arrogant thing, but it can also manifest as a confidence. Jealousy can be a nasty kind of worry, which is aggressive, but it can also be a vigilance that allows you to be alert to possible threats. So it has a role to play. Anger can be hateful and awful, but it can also be self-affirmation, which is sometimes very necessary. Despair, see, this is a bit muddled up here. Despair can be a positive thing in that it tells us to let go of anger or fighting, that, it's going on that cusp where this is a lost cause. Now I have to let go. And when you allow yourself to let go of something instead of fighting for it, you get the momentum of going down that emotional cycle, and that will sweep you right back up. So that is what they say, don't get angry, get even, because that's exactly what you do. You say, okay, I will let go of that point, or I will let go of that job, or I will let go of that relationship because it hasn't served me well. I will be without. And now I know what I do want in my job or in my relationship, and I will work towards that in a more determined way. So, toppling from anger into despair can be a very releasing moment. Letting yourself go into fear can lead to confusion and cowardice, but it can also allow you to know when it is necessary to flee and give up. And this is happening in all of our lives. We need to learn when to flee instead of fight. Same is true with sorrow and misery. As therapists, we know how important it is for people to grieve, for people to be bereft, and to really feel the pain of the loss. If you don't do that, then you will not fully arrive at that release. You will be in a sadness that will be still tainted with resentment, that will still be harking back to the things you have lost. So each of these emotions have secrets in them. There are many different aspects to each of those positions on the emotional compass. And it is also very important to link all that with the different layers of existence, because we feel emotions about values at each of those levels. So, your sensations will inform you about where you like to live or where you don't like to live, for instance, and that becomes a value. These are just examples. It happens in multiple ways. At the social levels, you will learn which people you feel good around and are creative and productive with you, and which people you need to learn to get a bit more distance with. So your feelings are helping you maneuver your way in the world at the physical and the social level. Similarly, they will help you understand your thoughts much better, because thoughts grow out of feelings. They grow out of you understanding your feelings and understanding the values, which now takes us to the spiritual level, the values that inspired those feelings in the first place. And having a conversation with yourself and others about your intuitions about those things and your belief system and your worldview will also help you get much better at understanding your emotions. Now I just want to take you through the color wheel, because I said to you, the emotional compass is colored in this way for a reason. Well, this is the reason. This is how color works. There are primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and secondary colors, which are red, two primary colors combined. So red and yellow combined is orange, red and blue combined is purple, and yellow and blue combined is green. And this is how they are arranged in the rainbow. So it gets a little more complicated. So look at the bottom there, where you see how the emotional spectrum, the color spectrum is arranged with these colors slowly shifting from one into the other. There you have a very full picture of how that color spectrum works. And obviously the intensity of the light will determine what sort of color that turns out to be. Understanding about primary and secondary colors and tertiary colors and how the whole thing melds together in a rainbow is very interesting. You can make paintings of your own emotions and see how they fit together. And you can represent these same colors. So these colors are exactly like the color spectrum is fitted together. And you can see how each color is translated by an emotion. By the way, this is also translatable to music as well. So you can connect the color spectrum to the spectrum of tonality as well, which is amazing, really. And here is your emotional compass in action, which tells you about aspirations, gaining, threats, and losses, and how to find your way, and how to learn to tune in to these different modes of being, and instead of being afraid, apply them to your senses, to your emotions, to your mental states, to, your moral compass as well. There are many applications of this. This was John Bennett's, one of our doctoral graduates from way back, 20 years ago maybe, who put the 4 emotional compasses together to show how they interact with each other and how complex it gets. That, in one moment, well, think in a moment for yourself. What are the emotions in your mind right now? There will be some things you are excited about and you're going towards. Maybe you have a sense, I can do this. I can learn to be much more clear about my emotions and really become friends with them and really live in a very different way. And that's exciting, but that will require a huge effort. But at the same time, you will be worrying about having to make lunch for yourself and other people maybe. And, that will require an effort. And you will be thinking about some sharp things somebody said to you and how that has decompressed a sense of value about something. And you will be thinking about maybe one of your parents' illness or about something being wrong in your children's school or something not working out. You will be in many different emotional places in relation to many different events in your life at any one time. In therapy, we try to do the very complicated business of separating those things out and allowing people to tease out the strands that get so tied together and to be aware of how they are being towards each of those different things that are important in their lives at any one time. Yes, in the way I am in my relationships, I am sort of quite loving and being able to always be on the right side of this. But when somebody is hateful with me, I completely lose my bottle and I go downhill. No, actually, now that we're talking about it, that wasn't true what I said. I can see that with my children, I'm doing fine with that. And I'm doing fine with this person or that person. But it is in this relationship or that relationship that this or that happens. So we tease it apart and we gradually realize we're globalizing and generalizing about our emotions, but actually they are much more helpful than that and they're much more specific than that if only we allow ourselves to feel the rich variety of different levels we are always on. And it helps to have these kinds of maps. Well, it helps me tremendously to have these kinds of maps where I separate things out systematically. What is happening for me at the physical level? Where am I in that fight between health and illness, pleasure and pain, strength and weakness, life and death? Am I going towards a minimal goal of fitness and safety and efficacy and survival? Or am I working towards an optimal value of vitality and well-being and ability, skillfulness, and existence, actually existing in the world? And so that's my map at the physical level, where my emotions guide me towards my values. At the social level, where am I in my paradox between success and failure, belonging and isolation, acceptance and rejection, love and hate? Am I working towards greater skill and understanding, kinship, recognition, and respect? Or am I going beyond that to an optimal value of actually building, making a contribution to the world, having loyalty towards others, being cooperative with them, and having reciprocity? You see how those optimal values are wise values. They are not saying, oh man, I just want health and success and love. They are much more considered. They take these dynamics into account. Same at the personal level. Where am I between identity and confusion, perfection and imperfection, independence, dependency, confidence and doubt? Am I evolving my individuality, have some sense of achievement, some autonomy, some poise? Or am I already going even beyond that, towards aiming for integrity inside of myself and a sense of excellence, being the best I can be, rather than just achieving? Am I understanding how liberty works? Am I clear about my inner world? And then finally, The same with the spiritual world, and we've lost a layer from the spiritual world. I can't see beyond that. I'm sorry. You'll have to do without that. So where am I in my fight between good and evil, truth and untruth, meaning and absurdity? Am I being responsible, real? Do I have a sense of how things work? Or am I going towards transparency, which ultimately leads to recognizing something about the relativity of truth or the enormity of truth and authenticity and a sense of value being the core of my existence? You see how this process towards these values is about being dynamic in the world and rising above your emotions, but rather than bringing down your emotions to become kind of vague and, not very colorful, suppressing them, dare to live with the depth of emotion. Because when you do that, you are actually enabling a person to find their inner authority, to face their anxiety and show them the meaning of existential courage. Now, existential courage is what we call this willingness to stand in life with all its pros and cons, its ups and downs, not to fear these, but to engage with them and make sense of them in a sensible way, as we were saying previously, to know what is needed to keep a balance and to have a sense of being able to manage at all these levels and to use your emotions to teach you that balance, to teach you resilience. This is how you become emotionally resilient and hopeful. You make that commitment to the future. You work towards love. You learn to pause and ponder what is really happening in your heart and in your mind. And you find a place to stand above your problems, your destructive losses, your difficulties, and you learn to make yourself safe again, to communicate, to build community and collaborate. As Frankl said, in the concentration camps we watched and witnessed some of our comrades being the people who were interned in the camps, behave like swine while others behaved like saints. Man has both potentialities within himself, and which one is actualized depends on decisions, not conditions. So this is where we become free, when we become answerable, not just to ourselves, but to life. When life asks you a question, pause and ponder. Don't be reactive in your emotionality. Allow your emotions to filter through you and feel them, savor them, make sense of them, and then understand where you are. Start always from what you love, but make those values greater and greater, more and more encompassing. Do this Meraki thing, which is to do something you totally love so that you can give your whole soul to it and leave a piece of yourself in your creative work. But know that if you're going to do that, you must first sharpen your tools, and your tools are your emotions and your senses and lots of other things, but your emotions are hugely important. remember that life is paradoxical, like in this painting by Magritte, which is called The Empire of Lights, where he depicted night and darkness and a sunny day in the sky at the same time. And somehow this is how it is in our lives. Even as it is nighttime in your life, the sun still shines above the clouds. And even if you think this is a beautiful sunny day, that sunlight is still throwing shadows. You cannot be free without anxiety and hard work. To find your inner authority in the face of your anxiety is to discover what existential courage is in action. Pay attention, because that's how you feel your emotionality fitting in with your being in the world. Robin Wall Kimmerer said, paying attention is a form of reciprocity with the living world. It is receiving the gift of life, and your emotions are also a gift of your life, with an open eye and a row. When all the world is seen again as a gift in motion that we pass on to each other, how wealthy we become. And your emotions are also a gift in motion that help us to navigate the world, to prioritize love and the commitment of work with enthusiasm. Kierkegaard says, when you do that, the world consists solely of opportunities for love. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be afraid anymore, or you're not going to be sad anymore when you lose things. You just begin to realize that you are a conduit for the energy of your emotions that flow through you, and that will not destroy you. You stand strong. You are able to have all of that flowing through you, and to be kind and loving towards yourself, care for your body in so many different ways, to keep your energy going, to care for your personality, because you have to live with others, so you need an ego, to care for yourself, because the more your inner world is full of integrity and self-reflection, the bigger the eye of yourself becomes and the clearer your vision will be. And your spirit, which is the sense in which yourself is connected up to the whole of what exists, one little spark in the whole of this amazing universe, this cosmos that we know so little about, but which is quite a lot like what's going on in your brain. That spirit will be clearer and shine more brightly as you allow your emotions a freer reign, and you will realize that you can do many more things, and that life is never about a quest for happiness, because there are many better values than that. Truth, beauty, loyalty, honor, courage, and freedom, and many other things besides are worth bringing into the world, and they'll shift your emotional awareness. It's all about allowing the light in and bringing the light out. It is about keeping your inner flame burning and passing on the light. Alan Watts said, it all starts by allowing your degree of presence in the world to grow, rather than measuring your days by degree of productivity. And this I really think is key. What James Baldwin said, the longer I live, the more deeply I learn that love, whether we call it friendship or family or romance or openness to emotions, I would add, is the work of mirroring and magnifying each other's light. But of course, that begins by allowing yourself to magnify your own light. These are my kind of rules for existential intelligence, but we don't really have time to go through them. You have heard plenty about what I think, why I think being clear with your emotions and open to your emotions is important to that. And I hope very much that this has helped you to do that more and to bring that out in the world more. So we come to the end of this presentation today. And I hope I have stopped sharing. No, I may not quite have stopped sharing. Yes, I think I have. Can you see each other again on the screen? It's actually 1 o'clock. And so we need to bring this to an end, but I'm happy to take 1 or 2 questions before we close. So feel free to just open your microphone and speak up. There may be questions in the chat. I'll have a look at that. Doesn't look like it. People need to go. Yes, okay, fine. We did say we'd finish at 1.
I do have a question if nobody else is going to ask you.
You ask your question and I will answer that, and then we will say goodbye to each other.
So you had the slide with the wheel and you're going up and then you're going back down
Yes.
because of the threat to a value. So I was wondering, like what I'm understanding is that, and it makes sense in my own life, is that it's cyclical and it's always going around like that.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, like from your theory or how you're seeing it, is the sense that the more that you're kind of aware of it and the more that you're befriending your emotions, that you kind of come to almost enjoy the cyclical nature, even of the negative
Yes.
emotions, and
Yes,
okay.
exactly. So you become to recognize where you are at, and you start to become aware why you are feeling this way, and you start to see the detail of that. Oh, yes, it is this thing that I expected to go this way, but it went that way. Well, that tells me something. Maybe I was forcing it, or maybe I wasn't making something clear, or maybe. And so you're learning. So your emotions that tell you something doesn't feel right give you this learning experience, and you begin to value that. You begin to value that every time there is a loss, there is a reason for that loss, and there is something good about each loss. And people often realize that towards the end of their lives, that the times of greatest challenge and the times of greatest losses were also the times when they got clarity about the things that truly mattered in their life. And that is when their values became clear and they began to reorientate their life in better and better directions. And if they haven't done that and they've just stuck with the status quo, trying to suppress the negatives, then they have often kind of stagnated and they often have regret about that. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, good. Lots to think about. Thank you for coming today. There will be a recording of this if you want to look at it again. Have a nice emotional day and don't be afraid of those emotions. Go with the flow. Goodbye, my friends.
Another question.
Can I have another question?
Very quickly then, because people want to leave.
Okay, so everybody can leave. If I take it to a very personal, like concrete example, if there is somebody in my life, for example, who is seeking contact to me, and I feel I don't feel like wanting contact with this person.
Yeah.
How like
Then you will feel something specific. It won't just be I don't want contact. You'll have you can work out for yourself what it is that that person, what threat this person is in your life, how you think this person will take something away from you. And you can take the time to understand what that is and to really think about it. And you might question that. You might say to yourself, well, this is how I feel about it. But I might, of course, be wrong about it. And I might investigate that further or not. Or I've had previous experience with this person, or I've had previous experience with a person who did a similar thing. And I know this is a time in my life where I need to avoid that. It's complex. Your emotion is not like a traffic light that says red light or green light. It is very detailed and it allows you to really go into understanding what is truly going on. And that is the refinement of your emotions that most people miss out on. So I hope you think about that, but now we really need to stop. I'd love to have another hour to listen to all your specific questions and respond to that. But we said 1 o'clock. It's 1:10. We say goodbye, my friends. You can find me on YouTube where I say plenty more things. Hope to see you there. Hope to see you at the next workshop at the Existential Academy as well. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.